Awesome. So, Kim, thank you so much for joining me today. I just got a chance to watch your documentary, Us Kids, and let me tell you, it is probably the most impactful documentary that I've seen in my life because I can just relate to it. So, thank you for that.
Thank you. That's nice words for a filmmaker to hear.
Of course. And I kind of just want to start off the interview with that topic in mind because I was just talking earlier to a friend about how this documentary feels as if it was almost shot in my backyard because everything was so real about that day. I was working in local news at the time and we were able to cover it so extensively. But what's kind of crazy is that my coworker was a part-time dance instructor at the same time, and one of her students actually was at the school at the time. So between us fielding calls from the assignment desk and then also fielding calls, from loved ones, she unfortunately found out that one of her students died in the shooting. And that's the one detail that I remember the most about that day. And I guess I just want to ask you, what's the one detail that you remember the most about that day?
It's a really good question. With Parkland, I was sort of, in a way, had traveled in that territory for years and thought, I kind of got to move on. And I was making a project in Florida that had nothing to do with this. And oddly enough, I was in Tallahassee with the mayor of that town filming. And there we were, and busloads of kids came from Parkland and ended up on the steps of the Capitol. The day it happened, I remember just thinking, this is different. Because of course, since Newtown, I had been affected very much when Pulse happened. And what happens when you get immersed in this space is, I became close to so many victim communities, and I would hear from those friends about the re-triggering and the re-traumatization. So I knew that they would be all upset. I was thinking about my friends in Newtown. But with, as soon as we started to see the youth, and Emma's speech, which wasn't until 2 or 3 days later, it had been in a string of school shootings, but then that's when it was sort of like, there's something very different here that's very hopeful.
What you did in this documentary was so cool because you also highlighted them in the activism space, but didn't shy away from highlighting them as just normal 17, 18-year-old kids. I mean, there was an awesome scene where they were listening to Smash Mouth's All-Star and they were singing along together. And I just started smiling and I thought to myself, how am I smiling in a documentary like this? And I just think, the way you were able to sort of paint that picture of hope at the end of everything that happened was so important. So I was wondering if you could speak on the importance of just highlighting them not only in the activism space, but also highlighting them as just normal everyday kids.
Well, thanks. You really did get to the crux of what I was going for, was they had gotten a lot of immediate attention, as we know. And it was a tough thing as a filmmaker to not be like, oh, I know about them and this is sort of fatigued. And make it that it wasn't about Parkland. It wasn't a Parkland story anymore for me. It wasn't even necessarily just a gun reform story. It was a story of coming of age, of your generation, of a generation of people, young people who've grown up with a lot of trauma that, has been fought hard for in inner cities and places across the country for years. And the mass shootings, sadly, they are terrorizing, but they are only 2% of the total amount of gun deaths in this country. They get a lot, as they should, they get a lot of focus. The kids right away, those kids were not looking for fame. They were looking they were traumatized and angry, as they should have been. And they were able to do something remarkable in your backyard that really moved an entire globe. Because as you see at the end of the movie, you have references to Greta Thunberg saying it was the Parkland kids that inspired me. For me, I studied political science and history, and there are moments in history that start as one moment that you don't know at the time become historically so much greater. And that's what this film is intended to be, is a testament to a moment in history that hopefully rivals so many other important moments like the civil rights moment. That's kind of how I saw it in the beginning. And then I had to jump in and started to form relationships and build trust, and really have been with them for 2.5 years, even after the film, in what we're doing to this moment of trying to release the film and starting with this kind of pre-launch of a drive-in series to be creative in the midst of COVID.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that drive-in series in a little bit, but I just thought of a question right now, Kim. You were speaking about moments, and I'm a sucker for a really good quote, and Cameron has this amazing quote in the documentary. You might know it before I say it, but he says, doing it because you want to and doing it because you feel you have to are two different things. And I had to pause. I wrote it down, and I thought, boy, if this doesn't speak to my life right now, I mean, what will? And I wanted to ask you as a director, did you feel like making this documentary was something that you felt obligated to do, or did you really want to just touch up on this topic?
That is such a good question, and I got chills when you reminded me of Cameron's line. There's another line of Cameron's that for me is equally about your generation and sort of the choice of nihilism juxtaposed with optimism, that you must reckon with that. You're living in a really challenging time. No one can deny that. And yet, I thought of that when I watched Billie Eilish, I must say, sing the other night, and she sang to a love song to her future. And I just thought that is so poignant, because you have time and you have your futures, and you need to be in love with your future, because that is what defines hope. That is what hope is being in love with a future that if things suck right now, they're going to get better. So it's a great question about my own feeling of doing things because you want to or you have to. I was compelled. I came out of that Newtown thing, that movie, which was a lot of the experience of adult grief. And I thought the one thing I wasn't able to really convey was there was a story I couldn't tell about half of a classroom of 2 classrooms that were killed, of first graders that the guys got jammed and they escaped and they survived and their identities were protected and should have been. But I made friends with some of those parents, and one of them is in the film. And I remember just thinking, what about those kids, and what about the hundreds of thousands of kids in communities of color across the country that experience this every day as first graders, as fourth graders, that imbues the rest of their life? And what does that cost? Like, who's asking that question? It's not just the 40,000 people a year plus now that die from guns. It's all of these, how do you measure that amount of trauma for a generation of anxiety, of what that leads to, anxiety disorders and substance abuse problems? I mean, it's just totally understandable. So that stuck with me, that I really wanted the nation to, that was before Parkland happened, and then Parkland happened, and those first graders were now sixth graders, fifth graders, and they kind of became, in an analogy, the Me Too group, that were like, now I'm old enough to say, this happened to me. Natalie Barden in Newtown, who I know, she lost her brother in 3rd grade, and then she was old enough and has become a voice. So there were, as extraordinary as the few kids in filmmaking, it's tough. You have to get people to connect with a finite number of faces, but those faces are extraordinary. But I met hundreds and hundreds of extraordinary young people with the same grit and the same gut as the people that you meet in the film, like Emma and David and Bria in Milwaukee, and Sam, who was shot. So I felt compelled. I won't say it was easy. It was the most difficult film I've ever made, but I was honored, and I loved working. I don't have kids, so it's sort of interesting that I didn't have that experience of, I certainly know, but I'm not around a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds a lot in my everyday Manhattan life. And I just came to really love and respect. Well, I channeled the 17-year-old in me, because I was definitely a rebellious 17-year-old. So that part of me made me feel like, yes, I wanted to do it some days, and other days I wanted to pull my hair out.
And I know, circling back to now the drive-in that's happening, and it kicks off tomorrow in Wynwood, which is really neat. And Sam's going to be there, and Alex, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be there as well. And just speaking about this like out loud in 2020.
Some special Zoom guests, including myself, zooming in. So it'll be a combo live Zoom thing.
Yeah, so I think that this is such a cool experience because it transcends just the drive-in experience. You're going there for basically an entire event. That's what it feels like to me, at least. And as a director, I guess in 2020, did you ever think you'd see your film in a drive-in in Wynwood in 2020?
I don't think any of us saw anything that we're experiencing in 2020. I mean, you name it, but no. The answer is no. But it's like one of those, it's like when you have lemons make lemonade. It is supposed to be a very cool, I certainly know it's a cool part of Miami. It's a cool cinema, and it's COVID safe. So we've done a couple of drive-ins, and that's what inspired me, because it was a really cool experience. It was a way to get out of the virtual world but still be safe, and kind of experience a little bit of the outdoors. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about that. In our industry, we have to get creative because a lot of people don't want to go into movie theaters right now. So drive-ins are, they're cool. And you can be in the comfort of your own car, and they have food, I guess. And so you can bring your own stuff, and you could argue that it's kind of maybe more interesting way to spend a night than even going inside of a movie theater. So to that end, I don't want to forget that we have decided we are so committed to having young people come, not just to Miami, but on our website, we're going to be announcing, that's uskidsfilm.com, that a certain limited number of young people who want to see the movie and spread the word, because we see the film as a call to action to get people engaged. We do want people to vote, whichever way they vote. And to that end, we're going to be offering a whole number of free admissions if they get there and they're not filled up.
Yeah, and honestly, I want more people to see this movie too, because I think more people should see this movie. It's very important, and it speaks, I think, to not just my generation, but the older generation too. It opens their eyes in a new way. So what you were able to accomplish with this, I think, should just be seen by everyone. Hopefully it's played for college classrooms eventually too, because I just think it's so educational, and it informed me in a way that I didn't even think I needed to be informed, because I thought I knew everything about this, but I didn't. So
can I ask you a question? It's so important. A lot of journalists and folks, who are in this field are older than you. I keep telling a lot of folks in my space, young people seem to like the film, but we don't have, with COVID descending, it's been a lot of challenges. And usually when you go to film festivals, you learn a lot. What did you take away or learn that you didn't know if you did follow this in the media and think, oh, I knew Emma, I knew David? What was new for you?
For me, I knew that this was a traumatic experience for these children, but to be completely honest with you, I knew about it, and then I think that topic of speaking to the mental health issue of it all, that kind of went away after a while. It was now focused on court trials, and it was now focused on, the family of the shooter, and it wasn't necessarily focused on the mental health of these children. And I think, to me, I learned about the extent of it all. Like the amount of time you spent with Sam, it opened my eyes to exactly what she is going through on a daily basis. See, for me, when I hear a headline, student and then quote, and then I feel like they only get to, what are you doing in the activism space? You're not necessarily focusing on the mental health aspect of it all. So for me, I learned about how it affected them mentally, not just necessarily physically out in the open in the public's eye. So for me, what you did was focus a lot on the extent of the trauma, and how even at the end of this documentary, you can tell Sam is still not okay, but at least she has Alex, so she has that person to sort of share that trauma with. And I just love the fact that you were able to focus on that mental health aspect.
Well, thanks. And to that point, she and Alex, this is kind of exciting. Did I say this? They are getting in an RV that we rented for them, and they're going on a road trip behind a kind of billboard that is about engaging youth, and they're driving through Florida in the next days, over the next week, into Georgia, where they're gonna be buddies again. And I said, you do what you want. You've got a megaphone, you've got a billboard, you've got a truck that you're following, that we're working with March for Our Lives. We do want people to vote, and they'll speak their truth.
I love that. And I have one more question for you, Kim, if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The end of the film is important because you open the film with Sam smashing objects, and it was in slow-mo, and I thought it was really cool, but I didn't know that she was with Emma at the time until the end, where it shows Emma and Sam drawing on that wall and then going in and smashing those objects. See, on the surface, I see two teenagers smashing objects to kind of just relieve some sort of frustration. But I think when you look into it a little bit deeper, when I watched it again, to me, it almost symbolizes the youth smashing barriers that were once set upon them by older generations. And now they're breaking through and saying, no, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And we want to do much more than just the minimum. So if that's the takeaway I got from it, I wanted to know, in your perspective, like, what is the one takeaway that you want kids to basically come away with when the credits roll at the end?
I couldn't have said that better. I am so happy that you artistically took that in, because what happened, sometimes in movies you contrive things, you set things up. I didn't even know what a smash room was. The real truth of it is, what happened was that it was getting close to the anniversary, the first anniversary. And I said, what are you going to do, Sam? She said, I want to get out of town, this and that. She said, but I've been really wanting to go to one of those smash rooms. And I said, I don't know what that is. She said, oh, you go to this place and you just smash it up. So I said, oh, do you think we should film it? And being the filmmaker, and she said, sure. And then Emma learned about it. And I think in her quiet way, Emma has enormous humility and empathy. She is just one of the most empathic people I've ever met. And in her very quiet way, I think she understood that Sam somehow needed to do this. And she was just said, if it's not intruding, I would like to support Sam in this thing. So there was a level of fun, like going bowling. And then, as you noted, a much deeper level of something cathartic. And you've actually pointed out a third level, not only their own therapeutic kind of release, but a third level of metaphor, which I think is that you couldn't have said better, about smashing through certain boxes that need to be broken through for this country to change. So I would say, yes, I think, I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but the takeaway here is that young people need to be respected, not attacked, certainly, and nor should they be fetishized as, you're the heroes and you're going to be a future. I heard this one woman on stage say, we're kids. Like, yes, we're the future, but we can't bear all of it. So I think the takeaway is voices of younger people at the table, intergenerational respect, and, younger people getting more roles of leadership. It's imperative.
I totally agree with you. And with that being said, Kim, thank you just so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having such, keen insight into the film. It's every filmmaker's dream to reach people like you. And thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Kim. And I'm believing the best is ahead for you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And you too.